welcome back to Good Global Vibes. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. So, we have part two of the intuitives for you. Enjoy. One of the things I really have had my attention on, because I've seen it everywhere, is this thing called ascension. Everyone's talking about it. So, I wanted to know your perspective on what's happening to the human being during ascension.
I have a complicated view. It's based a little bit on my background in Buddhism and on my studies of sort of the Aquarian age versus the Pisces age. I think we're in, personally, there's different opinions about if we're in the Aquarius age or not. There's like, it ranges from, it's started 100 years ago, and some say it starts like in 300 years. So I think we're in the in-between period. That's why we have a lot of conflict. Personally, I don't think it's about light versus dark. I really feel Jung had the right idea of integration, and that there's this danger of overly, thinking light is all good and dark is all bad. And when you think about the darkness, how it can bring peace at night, you go to sleep. And I feel like the dichotomy is where we need to change. Is that we're at a place where we can really start to integrate these forces and ground it. And I agree with Michael. I think there's this access to consciousness that I don't think we've ever had. I mean, you can learn things, you can get books that you would have to travel like 10 years, 20 years to meet like a teacher. We have this amazing resource. And sometimes I think that may be overwhelming for some people starting out because see, I didn't have that. Now people have all of this, so what do they pick? And I think that the United States in particular, since I like to follow the chart for the United States, we're in what's called the Pluto return. And the darkness is really just coming out for the US in terms of when we first were founded as the United States. It's a Pluto return only happens for countries because it takes 248 years. Our Pluto is in the second house of values, money, finances. It's complicated, but we've done some things to found this country that we really have to amend. What we did to the Native American people, we have to face it without shame and guilt. We have to say, wow, look how we founded this country. Do we want to continue? We can't just gloss over it. And I'm afraid we are glossing over it. It started coming out, I agree with you, with especially with the finding of the bodies of the residential school children. And of course, slavery, we've been dealing with that a little bit more. But I don't think we have yet even touched into this darkness, but not to feel guilty, but to say, hey, do we want to keep going? Can we make amends, real amends to these things we've done, and can we change our values? And so I think it's a long, slow process, ascension, and I think it'll take quite a while. And I think that there's some positive and negative. Like I said, I think that I can hear all sides of it, but I'm leaning a little more towards, I don't know, from my experience as a reader, I think what people think is evolving in their souls isn't always, um, because really, life is difficult and becoming a better human being is really challenging. I personally have found it after 62 years. I am still dealing with some of the same issues, and I've been conscious for a while. And I think that it's okay if it doesn't happen fast, but that light is coming in more. I agree with that. That things are speeding up. Absolutely. That magic can happen faster. Absolutely. I totally see that happening for people. Like all of a sudden they'll say and do something and it's like an hour and it's like, whoa. So I think it's a complicated and a great question.
Thanks.
Technology has definitely been shifting things a lot because, I mean, as Krista was saying, now we have access to so many things at such a speed that we wouldn't. I mean, think of the impact the printing press had on evolution of consciousness, just the ability to create books, and people could become literate. I mean, that's huge, in terms of a jump forward. And so I do think technology has a big role to play. I also think that there's a tendency for like to attract like. And so again, people who are working to become better people will tend to seek out other people who are working to become better people. And to me, that's the beauty in it, in a sense, but we may not be able to necessarily apply that to everyone in our society. And I think maybe it's time to just move away from that to a degree anyway, and to focus on individualism in the sense that what can I do to make those immediately around me better? You know, how can I help my neighbors? How can I help the person across the street? There's the homeless guy in the corner. Maybe I can get him a blanket, you know, and make his life a little bit better, rather than waiting for governments to do it or society to do it, which I just don't think is going to be the solution. But I think that for me, just taking on those individual things that will make our lives better, their lives better, and the impact of those in our friends and family and community around us, and just not waiting for others to do it, just taking charge. And I think there's opportunities afforded by technology to have a much greater impact than we could have had in the 1300s or 1400s when it comes to that. So that's one of the
Awesome.
huge things that I think is moving us forward.
Thank you. I have to tell you guys something that's happening that I think is very interesting. So I had this inquiry planned out like every other inquiry, which is I ask a question and then people, tell me about the inquiry. You guys are going into every single question I asked without me even saying it. And I'm sitting here going, wow, what did I expect from intuitives, right? I'm seriously sitting here like that. I should have thought that all the way through.
You already knew your questions.
I know. That's
And
exactly what happened. Like,
for those listening, we did not get cheat sheets either.
Like
So
you already I was gonna ask, so I'm gonna ask it anyway. And if you've already said it, great. But like, it's just really hilarious. Like, it's kind of funny. Like, how do I have an inquiry with people who are intuitive like that, right? What's present for me? It's just funny. I'm laughing because I'm like, of course.
And I'm saying it's not just intuitives. Everybody on the planet is feeling this, that, yeah, we can read each other's minds, we can sense each other's energies, we can have the answers before they're even asked. That's where we're going. That's what's happening as we evolve, as our brains, as our DNA shifts, as everything shifts in our consciousness. Yeah, we're able to do all of that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And what I was looking at is like, what do you think is going to happen in the U.S. and what could the human race do better, or evolve the planet with ease? Let's say that, with grace and ease for themselves. That's what I was looking at asking. Okay.
One of the things I think is important based on astrology is that there is just so much misinformation that rises to the surface in the news, that it's really important not to see that as reality, in the sense that you really have to see what's true and what isn't. So trying to discern the truth. Let's say I'm just even a regular person. I want to know what's really going on in my city. And there's just a lot of, I think, because there's this square between Mars and Neptune, there's a Neptune opposition. At the same time, the same square of Mars and Neptune, what I've noticed is, personally, my spiritual practice seemed even more effective. Like, if I get an obstacle, which Mars might bring, I have sort of doubled up my spiritual practice. And I have to admit, it's really magical what's kind of happening. So I feel like there's a lot of like extra help. But there's no doubt, based on what I'm seeing sort of symbolically, that if you have issues of asserting yourself or anger, and you haven't dealt with them at all, which we know some people haven't yet, and that's no judgment. It's no judgment at all. But that's going to be, it's a chance to really see it happen. And I've just seen it happen, like on subways, some really weird things, explosive things, and it started. And so I feel like it's going to be an interesting kind of strange time, with these sort of like a little bit of madness coming out. But I'm not necessarily worried about it. I just think it's going to be a little unpredictable, even how things are going to operate. And for me, sometimes just even staying away from social media more and Facebook more, because it's that collective energy, and that Michael's talking about how we need to really come to ourselves more, and be Mars in Gemini, with learning to be like self-directed in our mind and our actions. So sometimes taking a little extra time to do that. And you might find it's actually a very powerful time for you right now.
And I think history's kind of shown too that before every move forward, there's always a move back. The pendulum sort of swings in both directions. And I was reading an article today. Somebody who was running for office was saying, she's a Democrat, and she was saying that she hopes every nut job right-wing person gets elected that's running for office, because she thinks people need to realize that elections matter, and that we have to sort of shock ourselves into saying, okay, we just can't take things for granted anymore. And I think you see that, the dark ages give way to the age of enlightenment and so forth. And so I think we might be heading into a bit of a mini dark age, if you will, for the next little bit. But hopefully the people will come to their senses, and part of it will be people realizing that this isn't the path we need to go down, and that we will sort of again create an opportunity to move forward in some positive direction. But I think that we sometimes as a species, we sort of shock ourselves into doing the right thing. And I think we're moving into one of those ages where I think a lot of people will be shocking themselves into sort of doing better, hopefully. And that's maybe that's what I cling to, is that hope that out of this will come some good, I hope that that's true in my lifetime.
You can separate people by those who actually watch the mainstream news and believe it and are programmed with fear vibration, and then those who are just literally not noticing that and putting their attention and focusing on what they are wanting to create as co-creators of this new earth. And I do see the more the old structures are going down, like the Titanic, the old health, the healthcare and the government things that weren't working, and the Federal Reserve, and all these things are coming to light about what's not working, and really the truth behind them as control, fear-based control mechanisms. And people are waking up. We are being liberated. Maybe it's slowly. In my community, there's a lot of us, but I know when I go to the Midwest, I'm like, I guess no one got the memo that the earth is ascending. No one knows that it's a new earth being birthed right now. And it just feels like those who are programmed, watching the programming, and it's a certain vibrational frequency, and they're just going to keep throwing more and more fear-based new emergencies, new things that distract people from what's really important, which is our divinity, remembering that we're divine and taking action to be sovereign and free.
I think, though, you still have to educate yourself a little bit. The danger in ignorance, again, is you allow other people to develop your reality. So if people don't inform themselves what's going on, then you have the right-wing evangelical ministers telling you that this is what's going on and so forth. I think that there's a danger in the U.S. and really Neil deGrasse Tyson, the great physicist, was just saying that he was talking about people who believe in a flat earth, which I hope we all think is a bit ridiculous. And he said it proves two things. It proves that we live in a society of free speech where everybody can express any idea they wish, and that's a really good thing. And that we live in a society with a failed education system, and that's a really bad thing. And I think coming from outside of the US in particular, I think the shortcomings in our education system, it's just noticeable. And people don't know how to critically think. So they don't really know how to research good information. They just listen to whatever they're absorbing from whatever side they're absorbing it. And then you get into confirmation bias, where they're going to seek out whatever it is that will conform to whatever their beliefs and expectations are going into it. So if you already believe in a certain political side, then you seek out Fox News as your source of information, because that's going to confirm your biases. But I think a lot of it starts with just failures in our education system here. And it's going to be hard to enlighten everyone if they can't be educated properly, especially how to think critically, which I think we really come up way short in.
Okay, that was interesting and intriguing, to say the least, right? When we have more for you. So come back next week for part 3. Thank you so much for your subscriptions. We so love you, and we so are grateful that you're partners with us and raising the vibration and shining the light on what works in the world. So please pass on this episode and come back next week. Aloha.